Hi, welcome to another edition of Tolland County Economy. I'm Drew Crandall, your host. Thank you very much for watching today. As our TV show enters its 10th season, we're doing something unusual. Instead of taping the show at the Community Voice Channel studio, we're taping on location at the Hockenham Mill on West Main Street in Rockville. Why? Because there are some very exciting things going on here and in the rest of downtown Rockville. Activity like this requires the cooperation and assistance of many different business, community, and government entities. One organization that's making a positive difference in Rockville is the Downtown Rockville Association, or RDA. Joining me today is a member of the RDA Board of Directors, Jeff Hutton, owner of Earthworks in Tolland. Jeff, thanks a lot for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
You bet. First of all, let's go back to your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I grew up on Long Island, a town called Huntington, right on the north shore of Long Island.
Sure. I spent several years of my childhood in Stony Brook, not too far away.
Yeah.
And so you graduated from high school in Huntington. What was your educational path after that?
I went to school upstate New York at Oswego and ended up with a BA in both English and political science and a study of creative writing. And, while I was in both high school and college, my summer jobs were always landscaping. So that was in my heart.
Wow, that's interesting. What was your career path once you graduated from college?
I decided to travel, so I moved out to Denver, Colorado, and I lived out there for a couple of years, worked in publishing and printing for 2 years. And then, I'll make a long story short, then headed for Europe to backpack around Europe for a couple of months.
What countries were you in?
Well, we flew into Germany, and we just sort of were everywhere, a buddy of mine and myself. The trains were so wonderful at France and Italy and Austria. And,
I've been to all those places myself.
So it was a wonderful trip, especially for somebody in their 20s at the time. It was great, so. And I learned a lot. I mean, I had already had a great interest in both architecture and landscape, and certainly had a lot to learn over there.
Right. You learn a lot just through osmosis by absorbing it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you came back to the USA. What happened then?
Well, I did a short stint. My dad was in insurance, so I needed some work, and I took a management training program at Metropolitan Life, and I ended up working there for a year.
Sure.
Before I moved on, and I had told my father that I probably wouldn't stay forever, and he was okay with that. So it worked out very well.
But you met your wife there?
I met my wife there. Yeah, actually, she was my boss at the, so
wow.
It all worked out very well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how did you end up from Long Island to Connecticut?
Well, I went out to live in San Francisco for a year. I studied horticulture and design at City College of San Francisco. My wife and I stayed in touch. She was from Long Island, and my brother and I had ideas of opening. My brother had moved to Tolland, Connecticut, years before, and was bringing up a family there. And I'd visited him, and always thought the area was beautiful. And we were talking long distance, and over a course of many years about the possibility of opening a garden center and landscaping business. And we finally decided to do that. So I drove back cross country in 1979 and started building a greenhouse in Tolland.
Wow. Okay. So your business is called Earthworks.
Yeah.
It's in Tolland. You started it in 1979. What do you do?
Well, we've evolved from, we did have a garden center for 10 years, but the primary focus for me has always been design, landscape design, and installation. So we do primarily design, build, and installation of plants and shrubs and stone walls and patios, and I try to stay innovative. We do a lot of water features and things like that. So that's
residential and commercial?
Both, yes. Yeah. Primarily residential, but we do some commercial as well.
And where are your customers? Mostly within a certain radius of Tolland?
No, I mean, I guess primarily in this area, but we've worked we work in Shelton. We're starting a job down in Madison in the spring. A lot of West Hartford, Avon, when that was being built up. So we're all over. We go where the work is, but our center has been living in Tolland.
Right. Is your employment level seasonal? Does it go up and down depending on
yes,
the time of year?
Yeah, it does, and the type of work we're doing, and so it goes anywhere from, I have a core of half a dozen guys who've been with me for many years, and then we go up to 15 or 20 in certain seasons. So.
Okay. So shifting gears from earthworks to RDA, how long have you served on the RDA board?
I can't say exactly, but I think it's probably been 12 or 13 years.
Okay, almost since when it started.
Yeah, really
Pretty
right
close.
after it started, yeah.
And why were you interested in serving on that board?
Well, you know, I live in the area. I live in Rockville, not too far from the downtown area. And when I first moved here in '79, I do remember it as a much more vital community, and having kids growing through the high school and stuff. I sort of kind of observed the ups and downs over the 30 years that I've been here, and it just and I think and because of my background as a landscape designer and things like that, I mean I've always seen the potential. You know, it's such a different kind of place than Long Island. Every place has its own beauty and its own character, and one of the distinguishing aspects of a community like this is its architectural history and its cultural history, and Rockville really represents that better than many communities. And it seems to me that we've allowed it. I don't know if we've allowed it or it's just happened. We've allowed it to deteriorate a little bit. So I look forward to its renaissance. Sure.
What does the RDA do in a nutshell?
Well, the RDA is many things, but it's basically a group of concerned citizens and businessmen who sort of have a vision for the kind of, not the reinvention, but the renaissance of the downtown historical district, and primarily the focus of the RDA as an organization is on businesses, although from a personal standpoint, I don't think you can separate the business from the residential from that kind of thing.
It's all interwoven.
It's all interwoven and equally important, I think.
So, as a local resident, as an entrepreneur, as a board member of RDA, what do you think about what's going on here at the Hockenham Mill?
I think it's absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited about it, and it's first time in this building, and I've driven past it 1,000 times over the years, and just to see it and see the enthusiasm and see the interest and the resurrection of this once beautiful old building is just very exciting. You know.
Now, you were sharing with me that part of the reason why you get so pumped about what's happening here is if you go back to your hometown on Long Island, Huntington. Huntington actually had a little enclave, a village. Could you explain what you observed there?
Yeah, well, on a slightly different scale, Huntington was a very similar town to Vernon in the fact that, you know, we had sort of two towns. We had Huntington and South Huntington. It was all kind of one entity, but the old village of Huntington, when I was growing up and going to high school in the 70s and things, the village of Huntington was sort of starting to run down. The independent store owners, the clothing stores, you know, were starting to sort of, you know, fail because of the huge malls that were being built everywhere along the expressway. You know, Long Island Expressway became the, you know, was the large-scale Route 83.
That's right.
So that sort of started by the time I left town to go to college and travel and move. It had sort of, now I have good friends who still live in Huntington, and I go back to Huntington now. It's now a tourist destination. I mean, the malls have faltered and tripped over their own feet to some degree. But this village of Huntington has sort of absolutely resurrected itself. It's a beautiful place. And it's, you know, we do have the advantage there. They have the advantage there of being very right on the water, on the Long Island Sound. But, you know, it's not a great leap of imagination to see a parallel there. So I've experienced it. When I go back to Huntington now, I say, wow, you know, this was not what I remember it to be. You know.
And I spoke to the RDA board about a year ago, and I shared my observations about Portland, Maine, which used to be part of my sales territory. Back then, the waterfront was a mess, total shambles. And what they have done.
My wife and I just spent a weekend there last year, or 2 years ago, I think, and we were just amazed at that.
So if it can happen in Huntington, if it can happen in Portland, Maine, Why can't it happen here in Rockville?
Yeah, and the architecture of Rockville on a much smaller scale, obviously, than Portland is very similar.
It is.
You know, the beautiful structures, just the grounded feeling from a you know, from aesthetic standpoint, that the energy that went into creating these buildings is just pretty cool to imagine and to remember. When you see new buildings going up, you know, within a year and being torn down 20 years later, you know, these buildings have just have a real history to them, and they deserve some respect.
Right, and we may not have the oceanfront or the Long Island Sound waterfront, but we have the Hockanum River, and we have the topography, which is fascinating. I mean, for years I've organized events in downtown Rockville. And when I have guest performers come in or guests in the audience who don't know Rockville, they come into town and they go, this is such a cool place. So a lot of the negativity is more driven by the local folks, their attitude, than it is the people coming in from the outside. So the people coming in with a fresh set of eyes see the strengths and see the advantages and the beauty of it, where sometimes we're desensitized to the potential.
I think you're right, absolutely.
So being in landscaping, you know that it all begins with a vision. People hire you to spruce up their particular property because you come with a fresh set of eyes.
Exactly right.
They don't have the technical knowledge of agriculture and plants and flowers and rocks and gardens like you do. You come into a property that may look pretty bland, needs some TLC, and your creative juices start flowing and you start to see a vision of what could be. And you present that vision to the property owners and they buy into it, they hire you to execute the plan. And as months go by and years go by, they enjoy the benefits of the vision. And I see that with what's happening here in Rockville. But you know, whenever you have vision and you have creativity, you have the people who are enthusiastically behind it, but you also have some of the skeptics, the people who are maybe a little more cynical, a little more apathetic. So when it comes to Rockville, whether it's what's percolating in downtown Rockville with First Alliance, what's percolating here at Hockanum Mills, what's percolating with Roosevelt Mills and other properties, what words of encouragement through the eyes of a landscaper would you have for viewers and residents who may be more apathetic or skeptical about what's going on?
Well, I think it's to me it's very clear, because we have I mean, it's truly a diamond in the rough, and we put the emphasis on the rough.
Right.
You know, so you know, there's a balance. You know, you can create things in town, or you can in any town, or you can find what's there. You know, the rail trails and things like that. We've done such an incredible job with. But here we have something that most of the people in town consider sort of a negative aspect to our town, the downtown area, the small part of the downtown area anyway. I see it, and most people in the RDA, and many people in town, and I've been honored to work with people like, you know, architect Bob Hurd and artist Abbott, who used to be on the board. She was on our design committee. So, you know, I've shared that vision, and I've been educated through their vision of what this could be. But my point is here, you know, we don't have to invent anything. We have what's considered maybe a negative, we could turn into this incredible positive. That has that takes such a leap. I mean, it has such a chance to turn around the town that, to me, it's just amazing that there isn't more enthusiasm, and I don't want to downplay the enthusiasm of those people who have drawn me into this. But you know, there's also two parts of this. And again, these are my opinions only, but there are people who grow up in this town, or second, third generations. You know, the area that I live in, Rockville, when I first moved here in 80 or so, all of the houses around me were owned by, you know, the old mill owners, the dispatchers, the retailers from downtown, you know, and they were in their 80s, and, you know, it's an old town. It was an old neighborhood. I learned quite a bit from them, just in terms of how, you know, how much they loved the downtown and heard the stories. And even people my own age, our peers, people who grew up in town, David Lee, who's been on the design committee with me over the years, you know, he remembers the restaurants and the movie theaters and the, you know, and that's not that far in the past. So, anyway, this place that used to be sort of an attraction has become this sort of negative thing. And how we change that around, I think, is what the Rockville Downtown Association is about.
Sure.
And what the citizens of this great town of Vernon should be about as well.
You know, I detect a passion. You were talking about people who maybe were born and raised here, they've spent decades here, they have roots here. I think of a guy like Ken Kaplan, who's really spearheading the rejuvenation of this mill that we're sitting in right now. I mean, he's a Rockville guy. And he's not doing this just for money. He's not doing this just for business. He's doing this because he has a passion.
Absolutely,
and he wants to make a difference.
Yeah, that's so great. I'm just so amazed to see this happening around us here. And that's just awesome. And more of that would be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you have that creativity and passion and enthusiasm unleashed.
Yes.
You know, I think of Stafford Springs. We've had several businesses in Stafford Springs on the show over the years. More recently, we had the Palace Theater, and you know that was closed down for a long time, or it was a bar, and they've just brought a different texture to Stafford. Look at the arts community in Stafford.
Oh yeah,
The mill on 32 there. It's being rejuvenated one day at a time. And you and I are both creative people. You know, we're musicians, we're writers. So do you see woven into the fabric, of a textile mill city like this, the future of Rockville? Do you see the possibility of actually being a catalyst for the creative community as well?
Absolutely. That's what quite often these villages, or I know that village isn't the correct way to call it. Artis Abbott used to correct me all the time. But the downtown area of Vernon, the Rockville area, I think with the mills, with the spaces like these, are just inviting that kind of creativity. The mills could be converted to combinations of residences and studios. And absolutely, and creative communities need to be in close communication with each other. You need to be, the Palace Theater in Stafford Springs is a perfect example. I watched that, and I still haven't been there. I almost went to Leon Russell a couple weeks ago, where I couldn't make it for some reason. But that what they do, what they've done with that little Main Street is amazing, and there's a great little cafe across the street. So I mean, there's almost a pedestrian quality to it there, not quite yet, but there's a potential there.
And honestly, the layout of downtown Stafford is not as compatible as Rockville. When I go to the historic villages and towns across New England and the Northeast, I have discovered very few that have the kind of Central Park that we have.
We do.
That's something special. That's distinctly Rockville that cannot be replicated easily.
Yes, absolutely. I remember, years ago, early on in the RDA, we invited the students from the Yale Urban Design Program, and we did what was called a charrette, which was the director of the program was here with us and walking around town. And they were just, they were urban designers, so their eyes just, was wide open, and their jaws dropped when they saw some of the potential walking around through the Victorian areas and things like that. And some of the ideas they came up with were academic, but they were inspiring, and it was nice to see this old town from fresh eyes.
Exactly.
And I think one of the things we forget is, one of the things with Rockville is that it's not a flat plane of buildings. There's a lot of viewing vistas, and you can see a lot in one view, and I think that's an exciting part of the town.
Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, I worship at Union Church, and at the beginning of our worship service, we have the pipe organ, but on each side of the pipe organ, we've contemporized, and we have big screens for PowerPoint for the lyrics and for the sermon. And we usually, every Sunday morning at the beginning of the worship service, there's an opening slide on the PowerPoint on the screens with the view of downtown Rockville and Union Church from Fox Hill, from the tower. And it's just stunning because you see this little quaint textile mill city from the 1800s, and then in the background you see the fields of Ellington. And the contrast is really cool.
Yeah. I think that's another thing to think about too, or at least keep in mind, is that downtown Rockville, the Rockville area, was a destination point and a commercial area for the towns of Tolland and Ellington, that's where people came to shop, and
Sure.
people came to the theater or came to restaurants quite
Sure.
often. You know,
It was a cultural center.
it was a cultural center,
Sure.
and you know that. There's no reason to. I mean, it's sort of a stretch to get there
Right.
again.
That's right. Because the population of Ellington has grown, the population of Tolland has grown, so there are more people that could be attracted to more things happening in a rejuvenated Rockville.
Absolutely, and there are towns like Manchester, which is sort of a larger. Look what Manchester has done with their
Cheney
Main
Mills,
Street and the mills and things like that. So there's plenty of examples where this has worked wonderfully. And you mentioned Portland, Maine, and there's a ton of stories like that. So it just takes an investment in faith, I think.
Yes, it does.
And in each other. And we do need to embrace the vision, I think.
Right.
And if not, then things just sort of get ignored.
Sure.
And this place we're here, and Ken Kaplan's dream here, that's just a perfect example of what can happen on a small scale. And I mean, this isn't actually a small scale, but I mean, it's it's an example for other things to happen.
Right. This can be a starting point.
Exactly.
Right. Now, on the creative side, people may know you through RDA, people may know you through Earthworks, but there are other dimensions to who you are. I understand you are a writer and a musician. Could you share a little bit about that side of you?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I've always written. I've always loved to write since I was young. And back in the days when people used to write letters, I used to write long letters. But I did study writing in college and continued doing it. And I worked a little bit for the college newspaper and things like that.
Sure.
So it was just always, I never. I guess there was a practical side of me that never allowed myself to think I would be a writer. So I had a good enough work ethic from my family that I knew I had to get a real job.
Right.
So I pursued those, but never gave it up. And when I married my wife, she encouraged me as well. So I continued to research and write, and I'm very interested in history. So in the late 90s, I decided to write a book. I was actually right around the time when my sister died very young at 46, and she was a big supporter of me. So I decided to do that, and they said, okay, write your book, go ahead. And so I knew enough about the industry to think this was sort of a pipe dream, but I wanted to write. So I wrote a book about the early years of baseball and the Civil War, and it's a love story, and it's all kinds of things, but it's a novel. Historical novel, and so I sent it out to 10 publishers and told my wife, this is crazy.
Right. Sort of on a lark.
Pipe dream,
right.
Yeah, I know. Well, not so much a lark, but I with an understanding of how crazy it was.
Right.
And sure enough, I had two publishers interested right away, and I went to Cooperstown and met with the publisher, and because I was still naive enough to think that I should, and it turned out to be a great. He was a small publisher, Breakaway Books, and published Perfect Silence, and that came out in 2000. So ended up doing pretty well, and I did a book tour and signing down in Virginia where it was set, and down back in my hometown of Huntington and New York and stuff. So it was a wonderful experience. Since then, I've had other things happen, but then 2006, I had a landscape design book published called Inside Out. And then last year I was asked to do a children's book on gardening called Rocks, Dirt, Worms, and Weeds. And I did all the drawings for that and the writing. So that came out last year. So.
Wow. I can imagine, I see this in our culture with our young people. They are so absorbed by technology that, would you agree that the concept of kids actually getting involved in landscaping and actually creating landscapings in their own yards and actually going out and landscaping their yard. Do you find that that's sort of countercultural in today's high-tech wired world?
Well, I think so, yes. And my little book tries to get people out into the garden, out into the yard, out into the environment. This project's for winter and stuff too. But I think of my wife's a teacher in a school in Mansfield, and they in elementary school, and they do composting, they do gardening. So it's out there, and I think maybe we're getting back there. So
sort of a pushback to the relentless surge toward technology. There has to be some balance.
Absolutely, yeah. But I can't disagree with you saying that there's just too much technology. I mean, and I can't speak for my kids grew up sort of at the beginning of the computer age, but I think now it just dominates what kids do and what adults do. I mean,
and getting back to the Civil War, of course, we have the Civil War Museum in Rockville. They've been on the show. I know we're running out of time, but briefly, there's a fascinating history. You mentioned baseball and the Civil War. Why did you put those two together?
Well, I'm a big baseball fan. I think at that time I was even more so. My son was playing Little League in the Rockville Little League and was really into it at that time. I discovered through reading. I mean, history is there for the reading and discovery, and I saw this parallel. I saw, there are stories of the Confederate troops playing against the Federal troops, and I found this just amazing story. And
cool.
I did some of my research in Rockville Library. That was I started I wrote the whole book in a loose leaf notebook, and then rewrote it because I had my first computer about that time. So,
wow. So it's almost like Gene Pitney composing some of his songs right here in Rockville at Fox Hill Tower. You composed this book based on research at Rockville Public Library.
Most of it was from Rockville Public Library. Absolutely.
How cool is that?
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, what is a website for your business if people were interested? And secondarily, as you come up toward the spring and summer, might there be possible employment opportunities at your business?
Sure, yeah. I'll answer that in two ways. The first one is www.earthworksct.com. That's our website. And I'm always looking to hire good people and hardworking young people, or people in general. And we do hire seasonally. We do have a core of full-time guys, but we're always looking for good help. Yeah.
Cool. And the website for the RDA, I believe, is rdact.org or .com. Honestly, I'm having a brain freeze as I'm freezing in this building here.
Right.
But either way, you can Google Rockville Downtown Association and find it. And also, we have a website for the TV show that's very popular, TollandCountyEconomy.com. That's TollandCountyEconomy.com. We track local job openings, like at Earthworks and like at Rockville Construction and elsewhere. And we have a free email that goes out to hundreds of people regularly, identifying the employers that have openings and with hot links to their websites so you can get more information. So those are free. You can go to TollandCountyEconomy.com for those emails. Plus, recently, we now have about 20 of our most recent shows online. So in addition to watching Tolland County Economy on Thursday nights at 7 on CBC, you can actually click on 24/7 and watch a bunch of our shows anytime you want. So again, there's a link to all those videos at TollandCountyEconomy.com. Well, here we are live at the Hockenham Mill. It's amazing. We picked this location to tape the show because you can see the dilapidated 4-story mill behind us. And as the months and years go by, God willing, this place is going to be transformed, and you won't believe the kind of life and activity and vibrancy that's going to be in this complex a few years from now. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.